Welcome to the Branching Out podcast. My name is Celine Whitetail.
And I'm Gull the Cactus. This is
Now,
Branching Out.
with 100% more glasses.
I thought you were going
forgot
to
to-
say that before
I forgot.
Do you want to try again?
No, I do not. We're messy, so.
This is Branching Out, the podcast where we grow in knowledge together. This week, our topic is Teddy Roosevelt.
Yep.
This is the part where I talk about his history. Who goes first this week, you or me?
I mean, I technically went first last week because we did it in a weird order.
All right, then I will get rolling. All right, so Teddy Roosevelt, named Theodore Roosevelt, is frequently polled as one of the United States' greatest presidents, like regularly in the top 5. He was the 26th president of the United States from 1901 to 1909 and was vice president under William McKinley and assumed presidency after McKinley's assassination. Awkward, but you know, it happened occasionally, not too often. They were about 6 months into McKinley's presidency when he was assassinated. So he was known to have had asthma and was very sickly as a child, and is said to have overcome his health problems basically through like sheer force of will and persistence and like quote unquote a strenuous lifestyle. And an example of his style of robust, bombastic, and outgoing outdoorsmanship and just general demeanor can come from this portion of his strenuous life speech, which he gave in New York sometime before he was president. I think I didn't write that part down. I wish to preach not the doctrine of ignoble ease, but the doctrine of the strenuous life, the life of toil and effort, of labor and strife. To preach that the highest form of success which comes. Oh no. To preach that highest form of to preach that highest form of success which comes, not to the man who desires mere easy peace, but to the man who does not shrink from danger, from hardship, or from bitter toil, and who out of these wins the splendid ultimate triumph.
I absolutely believe that he is what began that generational belief in the baby boomers and the baby boomers' parents that illness and mental illness don't exist. Just stiff upper lip and tough it out, and you'll just, be fine.
I mean, I don't personally think he would believe in that mentality. I can see why other people would get that mentality from him. I think he would believe that you can just work hard and things will get better.
Tighten up your bootstraps.
He was just fucking built different, okay?
I am genuinely, this is a little bit of a spoiler, but, and I didn't really write this down in my notes anywhere. I genuinely think I am surprised that so many people like him, because he does not seem like he has a very likable personality based on what I have read. He seems like a very stubborn and proud man, and I mean this on a personal level. Like, I imagine he was just incredibly frustrating for his wife and other people in his close family, because you wouldn't be able to tell him anything. He would just do whatever he wanted. And what I will talk about will indeed be him doing exactly whatever he wanted. And it just seems like a very stubborn man.
He was a reform Republican from New York. He served as the Assistant Secretary of the Navy in the late 1890s and was elected governor of New York in 1898. And New York State Party leadership was so done with him and all of the shit he intended to change and all the work he intended to do that they convinced William McKinley to take him as a running mate to get him out of the governor's seat because they didn't want him like changing too many things in New York.
Yeah, I read that and I was a bit confused by it because I of course, I read a little bit of his early biography as well, and I was reading that and it was like they were so against his policies that they pushed him to be vice president, and I was like, huh? Like, well, those two things don't seem like they match together. But if they were doing it to get him out of the governorship and so that he couldn't change things on the state level, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, they couldn't have known, unless they were behind McKinley's assassination, dun dun dun, they couldn't have known that he was going to become president and therefore have even greater power than he would have as governor. They also, like, the vice presidency is famously the do-nothing position. They thought that, like, by giving him that quote-unquote honor, he would be put into a position where he was, like, safely away from doing anything, really.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. The vice presidentship is really just the position created in the case that something happens to the president. They have someone that shares his values that essentially carries out his term for him. Yeah. And that is a very interesting, like, governmental position that we have.
I think it originated from, the first... no, it originated after Washington, because Washington was different. But it originated with the Adams and Jefferson, election, because they were like, oh, but you did such a good job. We want to award you with, the ability to have some impact on the government. And so the loser became the vice president.
Mm-hmm.
But that later changed, but,
Yeah, because it would make even less sense to have the person that was, like, had your opposing ideals as your vice president, because then what would they even do? Unless it was, like, intended to, like, kind of counterbalance the president and with the intent of, like, allowing the vice president to give his opinions from the other side's perspective and be like, I know these are your policies, but these are our policies, and there might have been a chance that he might change his mind if the vice president had a good argument, but that's the only reason I could see why that would be beneficial.
Which was traditionally not how it ended up, even if idealistically that was what it was touted as, potentially.
Our government rarely does work how it's supposed to.
But TR was the youngest person to become president at age 42. He was a progressive and a champion of fairness. He wanted to break bad trusts in corporations. He wanted to regulate the railroads and ensure safer food and drugs for the people. He began the construction of the Panama Canal and earned the 1906 Nobel Peace Prize for his efforts in ending the Russo-Japanese War. He prioritized conservation and established national parks, forests, and monuments to preserve America's natural resources. Some of his legacy includes the, adage of speak softly and carry a big stick, which is apparently an idiom he was known to say. My
favorite idiom.
The idea behind that is, speak in a soft and measured manner, but be able to back it up with, like, your own, confidence and
the might of our military.
Yeah, necessary aggressiveness if called upon and needed. But don't go into things being aggressive. Put your best foot forward. And the teddy bear is also named after him. I didn't go into the story behind it because I don't remember it offhand, and I didn't click that link. But the teddy bear is named after him.
I should have researched that. I have a teddy bear literally sitting across from me in my room. I'll go into a little short story about this. It's not had nothing to do with Teddy Roosevelt, but as Gull knows, I'm not an entirely sentimental person, but there is one object that I refuse not to take with me everywhere I go, and that is my stuffed bear, whose name is Hair Bear, because of course it is. I named it when I was unable to talk. And that bear is literally as old as I am. You cannot find them anymore. I looked. because he is in rough shape. He was given to my mother as a a baby shower gift, and it was given to me as one of my early baby toys, and it was my security blanket through my entire life. I was a big fucking baby, and I had to take it with me everywhere I went. To every slumber party I ever went to, it had to come with me. I had to take it with me everywhere. And I distinctly remember going over to a friend's house for the weekend and accidentally leaving it there and bawling my eyes out until my grandmother drove another hour back to get it for me. And now that bear sits with me even now over there, underneath, on like the little shelf of the bedside table next to my bed. So I have a teddy bear, long story short.
Mm-hmm. Famed teddy bear named after Teddy Roosevelt.
Yep.
And that's the cutest fucking story.
I'm not embarrassed about my teddy bear.
He made conservatives mad when he dined with noted black activist and leader Booker T. Washington at the White House with his family on October 16th, 1901. This had the unfortunate unintended consequence of like black political influencing leaders not really being able to dine at the White House for a few decades, because I don't, when I say he made conservatives mad, I mean like the South, which was still, was
South.
very, very mad and like published all kinds of things. There were, members of Congress who were saying any old shit on the floor of Congress about this situation. It was a bad look, bad time, and unfortunate because, TR is someone who did not end up pursuing civil rights as one of the like key aspects of his presidency, but was someone who, was not racist and also like believed in people being able to, be worth the same as other people. So he tried to run for a third term for president in 1912 when he was frustrated with his fellow Republicans and their lack of positive change as he viewed it, and he founded what was nicknamed the Bull Moose Party that ran on a progressive platform. Such ideals as restrictions on campaign finance contributions, the establishment of a social insurance system, the 8-hour workday, women's suffrage, among other things. There were more ideals on their platform, but not all of them were.
Is 8 hours more or less than what was happening back then?
Less.
Okay, then we're not mad at him.
No. That was a period of time where regulations on like labor and safety were few and far between, and I don't know if there was an upper limit on how long a worker could work at that point. This party, with Roosevelt at the head in that election of 1912, won 27.4% of the popular vote compared to William Howard Taft, who was Roosevelt's successor and like also protege, who was a Republican, at 23.2%, making TR the only third-party presidential nominee ever to finish with a higher share of the popular vote than a major party nominee in the United States. Woodrow Wilson did win the election. He was the Democrat. But my specific topic, that was kind of my overview of him. My specific topic is the National Park Service.
Mm-hmm. She stole my topic.
I did?
That's also, yeah, of course. Out of all of the things that he did, of course I wanted to talk about, conservation. I'm a dryad.
I'm literally a cactus.
Yeah, and I literally grow plants out of my head. So,
I mean, look at my head.
Yeah, I made that. Will you just get on with your topic?
National parks. So national parks had existed before Roosevelt, but he doubled the number of sites within the national park system during his presidency. And I saw somewhere else, I don't know if I wrote it down, that he set aside, oh yeah, he set aside more federal land, national parks, and nature preserves than all of his predecessors combined. Man was interested in protecting national land. So the first sites that he had established were Crater Lake, Wind Cave, Sully's Hill, which later became a game preserve, Mesa Verde, and Platte, Oklahoma, which is now part of the Chickasaw National Recreational Area. As part of the Antiquities Act of June 8th, 1906, the president became able to proclaim historic landmarks, historic or prehistoric structures, and other objects of historic or scientific interest in federal ownership as national monuments. And so he interpreted this very, very broadly because, like, he thought it was super important for land to be preserved rather than just free for any old corporation to go and stink it up with their factories. So he did a lot of preserving. By the end of 1906, he had proclaimed 4 national monuments: Devil's Tower, Wyoming. Hey, Deadlands reference. Not really, I'm joking, but like Devil's Tower is pretty famously a significant location in the Deadlands TTRPG, which I love. El Morro, New Mexico, Montezuma Castle, and Petrified Forest in Arizona. He also protected a large area of the Grand Canyon as a national monument in 1908, and by the end of his term had reserved 6 cultural areas and 12 natural areas using this authority. 4 National Park Service sites are dedicated to him: his birthplace at Sagamore Hill in New York, the Teddy Roosevelt Inaugural Historic Site or something like that in Buffalo, New York, Teddy Roosevelt National Park in North Dakota, which is where he had hunted before, and Theodore Roosevelt Island in Washington, D.C., which I have been to. You can easily get to it by a short walk from the Roslyn Metro station on the blue, white, and orange lines. And one time when I was there, I saw a Baltimore Oriole bird, not a baseball player, and it was really, really beautiful and magical. I have a link that I'm going to open real quick. I stopped counting at like 75 because it was taking too long and I kept miscounting things. But this is a list of lands protected by Theodore Roosevelt through executive action. And there's a lot of them, including places such as San Isabel Forest Reserve, Santa Rita, San Francisco Mountains, Yellowstone and the Tetons, Yellowstone again, Santa Catalina Forest, Baker City Forest Reserve, Santa Barbara Forest Reserve. The list goes on and on. And it includes Dixie National Forest, which I've also been to, and is really cool. Has a lot of aspen groves, and it's really, really beautiful and mountainous and magical. It's southeast, I think, of Zion National Park. Teddy Roosevelt's efforts weren't just aimed at environmental protection, but also at ensuring that society as a whole, not just the elite and not just corporations, were able to benefit from the USA's natural resources. He was responsible for elevating Gifford Pinchot, the head of the Bureau of Forestry, by moving power over environmental issues from the Department of the Interior to the Department of Agriculture, with his agency ultimately being renamed the U.S. Forest Service. Pinchot presided over multiple acts of conservationist policies for national forests. I also don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right, because like that's just how I figured I would, but I didn't like Google it, so sorry if I'm not. The Newlands Reclamation Act of 1902 promoted federal construction of dams to irrigate small farms and placed 230 million acres of land under federal protection. As mentioned above, there was the 1906 Antiquities Act. The Inland Waterways Commission was created to coordinate water projects for conservation and transportation purposes, and he held the first Conference of Governors in 1908, which was the first time the governors of the states had ever been convened to meet, and the goal then was to boost and coordinate conservation. He also established the National Conservation Commission to take inventory of natural resources of the country. TR wasn't without critics, especially on this topic. John Muir, who was the founder of the Sierra Club, wanted nature preserved for beauty rather than for like use. He wanted it to just be kept beautiful and perfect and pristine. And while TR was interested in preserving, the natural beauty of the land, he was also interested in making sure that it was usable, and not just usable, but like preserved and maintained for the use for generations to come, which was exemplified in this quote. To make the forest produce the largest amount of whatever crop or service will be most useful, and keep on producing it for generation after generation of men and trees.
But not women.
He was pro women's suffrage, so I think it was men and like.
But not women breathing.
That's true.
Women, just men and trees. No women. So hold our breaths. Are you actually holding your breath?
Yeah.
Okay. So was I.
Oh, okay.
I
just a couple of idiots.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry. It was a stupid joke.
He also had some backlash over the belief that conservation would prevent economic growth in the American West. I just have a closing note, which is not really related to his conservation, but more over like him in general, because reading back on his history, he seems like, I'm sure there's a lot of rose-colored glasses here. Like, he seems like he was a very idyllic, like, progressive president, and someone who a lot of people would want to see in office, like even today. But I think he did have a way with words, and this is part of a speech he gave at the Sorbonne in Paris in 1910. It's part of his citizenship in a republic speech, and this is the man in the arena passage. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat.
That's actually really beautiful.
Yeah.
Not to go like too deep into my lore or anything, but Gull knows how much I struggle with personally giving up on things, because I grew up in a family, like I'm sure many people have, where you were asked to go into a sport or a activity that your parents really enjoyed when they were younger, and so they want you to do it now too, and it turns out that you don't like it very much. So when you get older and you start caring a little bit less about doing what they want to do and wanting to try out your own things, you get called a quitter for not wanting to do the things that they wanted to do when they were younger. And so I still have some deep-seated traumas. We experienced it literally just the other day. I don't remember the exact phrase that was said. We were watching some reality show, but it involved like quitting when like someone, like a child, just didn't want to like do a sport anymore, and I just got so triggered. And that saying is really beautiful, because it's basically just saying, hey, people who sit and tell you that you're failing and you could have done better if you had just done this, this, and this aren't important, because it's important that you tried it all, whether you succeeded or not. And I think that's a very important lesson for people to take away, because it's very true. and we hear about it a lot, especially on the internet. Lots of people like to armchair referee about everything and be like, get on people that, you know, fail at something. And it's really nice to hear, you know, things like that.
Yeah. I know you said that, like, at the top that you were going to talk about how he seemed like he was very stubborn and hard to deal with, but he also seemed like he believed really hard in people's ability to do things for themselves and that they should be given the chance to do good for themselves and for other people. And anyone who prevented them from doing that needed to get out of the way. And, like, that is, there's something very admirable in that position. Like, he was obviously very, like, you know, outspoken about it, but I think there was also a degree of, like, poetry in words such as that speech that he gave.
Yeah, it just depends on if he went too far in a certain direction of being like, oh, you wouldn't be in the position that you're in if you just tried harder. That's when it gets into the realm of you're no longer being motivational. You're just, you know, beating a person while they're down. Because, you know, some people have a harder time getting through struggles than others. And it's weird when people who preach, like, you know, you can do anything if you try hard enough, but you have to put in the effort. You're not a quitter, blah, 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 until they're like, oh, well, you didn't try hard enough. That's why you're in the position you're in. It's like, aren't you just calling them the quitter? So what point are you trying to make exactly?
And in my reading and research, it seemed like the only time he ever had criticism for when people try and do shit that doesn't work is if it was things that were done to exploit other people. So if it was like politicians who were trying to, you know, hold back what he viewed as, you know, beneficial progress, or like corporations that were trying to exploit the masses and stuff like that, that's where it seemed like most of his like active criticisms went, rather than to like people who, you know, might be trying their hardest and might not have the resources to do it. Yeah. So that was my section.
So out of all of the national parks that Theodore Roosevelt has founded, which one would you want to go to the most and why?
Okay. Well, the only of the things that he allocated or preserved, I've only been to Dixie National Forest, which was beautiful. It had these aspen trees. It was great. But I would like to go to either Crater Lake or Mesa Verde, because Mesa Verde is like this really cool historical site with these Pueblo houses built into a cliffside, and it's so cool. But I think Crater Lake might edge it out because it's so cool. It's literally a lake in a basin of a ring of mountains, and it's just like, I can't imagine getting to see, you know, it's a lake inside a volcano. Like, it's super deep, it's super blue. I think it would be really, really cool to go to Crater Lake.
So I want to start with, if you weren't going to do his national park creation and conservation efforts, I definitely would have. But instead, I'm going to talk about, I want to say equally important, but all that kind of stuff is debatable. Roosevelt created the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis, which we now know as the March of Dimes, which is still around today, but with a much different mission statement because they solved the first one, which is not something a lot of nonprofit organizations can say. So NFIP was created on January 3rd, 1938 by Roosevelt to combat the epidemic of polio. Polio, for people who don't know, because of this foundation, we really don't have to deal with this anymore, was in our countries. It is mostly an asymptomatic or mild symptom disease, which causes symptoms such as sore throat and fever. It can eventually become worse and can cause permanent muscle weakness and paralysis, which can continue even post-treatment, and was very much an epidemic in children because they could be born with the disease. There is no still current treatment for polio once you have it, but it is entirely preventable through the polio vaccine, which is a standard vaccine that you are given over the lifespan of your life in the United States, and probably lots of other places too. Roosevelt was diagnosed with polio in 1921, but I think post-mortem, his diagnosis was corrected to, and I'm going to pronounce this wrong, it's either Guillain or Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is an autoimmune neuropathy condition that was misdiagnosed, which is wild to consider that, although this probably wouldn't have happened. If Roosevelt was diagnosed correctly, he might have started a nonprofit to cure that disease instead of polio, and it might have continued to be an epidemic for some time. Interestingly, it was kind of a sister, the NFIP was a sister organization to the Georgia Warm Springs Foundation, because it had an 88 degree or 31 degrees Celsius natural hot spring on the property. And Roosevelt visited there first in 1924, and he settled down in the area. He bought the resort the hot springs were connected to, which was described as dilapidated, and visited it frequently even during his presidency. He created the institute after he heard of a boy who regained the use of his legs after complications from polio through hydrotherapy in the hot springs. The operations of the hot spring resorts were paid for by the NFIP. So just to clarify, he found out about the hot springs, bought the dilapidated ranch built on the hot springs, turned it into a 1930s hydrotherapy center, which was then paid for by its operations were paid for by the nonprofit that he created after he founded it. Anyway, this was a pretty standard nonprofit like we would see in St. Jude's Children's Hospital today. It was a collaboration between scientists working on a vaccine and volunteers working to raise money. It grew to over 3,000 county chapters during his time as president. The name of the March of Dimes is a play on words from a contemporary radio show called The March of Time, which was coined by a radio star called Eddie Cantor. Cantor called people to action to donate for President Roosevelt's birthday, January 30th, 1938, and just 27 days after the foundation's creation. And at the beginning, they thought it was a failure. It only garnered about $17 total in the first 2 days. They essentially, I don't want to say marketing because that's not what it was, but the slogan that they used was that if a certain amount, I don't remember the math, but if a certain amount of if a million Americans gave just a dime, they could raise $100,000. And they only garnered $17 in the first 2 days. They thought that the campaign was going to be a failure and began working for additional ways to campaign for money. However, that all changed when the USPS finally got off their butts and did their jobs. What was coined as a silver tide, which actually swamped the White House, over 80,000 letters were delivered to the White House containing dimes, quarters, and dollars, and the official correspondence to the president was buried in donation letters. The final count was the equivalent of 2,680,000 dimes, or $268,000, $100,000 in 1 week. The equivalent to that in today's currency is $6,238,936. They raised $6.2 million. Now, have you been entertained really rooting for our boy? Well, this was all a history test and you failed. None of this was done by Theodore Roosevelt. It was done by Franklin D. Roosevelt. And if Google is going to lie to me, then I too will lie to you. So the last 45 minutes of me struggling to get these facts down at 7 a.m. on a Sunday isn't a waste. Congratulations if you passed and at any point thought, he didn't do any of this, your timeline doesn't match up, your gold star is coming in the mail. If you didn't, pick up a book.
Oh my god. I was so like, I remember you telling me this morning. I forgot. And so you started talking about the March of Dimes, and I was like, it doesn't seem right. And then I remembered.
Yes. I Googled this morning. This morning I started doing my research at 7 a.m. I sat at my computer and I was like, I Googled, what did Theodore Roosevelt do? Like, that was how I was gonna do my research. And I found this little, it's Kiona, or however you pronounce it, article that was like, what did Roosevelt do? And that was what the original question was. But then it took me to a related question. And someone was like, Roosevelt created the thing that ended up saving my life. And that's how I got down the March of Dimes thing. It wasn't until it was like 1938 and I started looking at dates, I was like, I don't think this is right. So I started going back, and it's because I confuse Franklin Roosevelt and Theodore Roosevelt. I always think that Theodore Roosevelt was the one that got elected 4 times. It wasn't. That was Franklin, the one I was talking about just now. And I realized that that entire spiel, everything that I wrote down, that took me an hour, and I had wasted my time because the person wrote down the related question was, who was the better president, Theodore Roosevelt or Franklin D. Roosevelt? And of course, I skipped that part because that's not what I Googled. So I was just like, yeah, this makes sense. And of course, they just always refer to him as Roosevelt, even though there are 2 of them. So it just the dots didn't connect. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't gonna just copy and delete all of this. So I turned it into a bit. So I hope it made you laugh.
I bet there was at least one person starting to write a comment
I know.
Celine. Hopefully those people continued listening instead of clicking off of the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But we shall see. Oh, one thing real quick.
Yes.
I had to look it up because I was like, what are you talking about? Apparently what he had was Guillain-Barré, which I needed to Google the pronunciation of just now. So that is the disease that he had.
Guillain.
That you were not sure how to pronounce.
Yes.
How to pronounce.
Mm-hmm.
And I, upon reading it, didn't know how to pronounce it either, so had to Google pronunciation.
Yes. It's like a French word. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So back to Theodore Roosevelt, the person that this episode is actually about. What did he do? Tons of things. And Gull talked about one of my favorite things, which was the creations of the national parks. I did get that right. I will not be surprised if when Gull is in her 60s, she cashes in on her retirement and drags me to every U.S. national park that exists.
At age 62, or maybe they upped it to 65, you can get a lifetime national park pass. And so at the very least, we won't have to cash in on retirement to get into the parks, because that will be paid for with the cost of the pass, which I think it's $100 for the rest of your life.
Wow.
Yeah.
Great. So, not being able to talk about that, I'm going to talk about an adjacent topic. The Roosevelt Rondon, I'm assuming I'm pronouncing that right. It's a British name, I think. Scientific expedition was a survey expedition in 1913 to 1914 to follow the Rio da Duvida, or the River of Doubt, in the Amazon basin. It was led by Theodore Roosevelt after he failed to win the 1912 Republican presidential nomination, which caused him to say, fine, I'll create my own political party and win the presidency for the 3rd time that way, which is when he created the New Progressive Party. He garnered enough votes to cause the Republican candidate William Howard Taft to lose because the Republican Party was split on who to vote for, and Woodrow Wilson became the next president. Roosevelt decided to go to the Amazon as a result. He originally just planned to speak, because he loved to do that, in Argentina and Brazil, and then go on a cruise of the Amazon River. However, the government of Brazil said he should participate as an explorer on Candido Rondon's expedition of the newly discovered headwaters of the previously unknown River of Doubt. Roosevelt agreed because he's crazy and considered it his last opportunity to be a boy. He considered it an adventure, and that was one thing that Roosevelt was. He was an absolute adrenaline junkie, never liked to do things the easy way if given a harder alternative and a crazy alternative. He was joined by his son, Kermit, which...
Kermit?
Poor guy. Yeah, he had a son named
the
Kermit.
Frog?
Yeah, I would make a joke, but unfortunately Kermit committed suicide while serving in one of the world wars in Alaska. So I did have a joke written about his name. It feels like it's in poor taste now, so I'm not going to.
I'm sorry for laughing, Kermit.
I think it's okay. I think he's been dead for 100 years. I think it's fine. He had recently become engaged, but was asked by Edith, Roosevelt's wife, to keep his father safe. It started in, and I'm gonna pronounce these names wrong, I'm sorry, they're Brazilian, Caceres, a town on the Paraguay River, in December 1913. They didn't reach the River of Doubt itself until February 27th, 1914, almost 3 months later. The expedition split up at that point due to dwindling food supplies, with one heading to the Madeira River and Roosevelt and the others continuing on. There were a lot of issues that plagued this expedition, the primary being disease, with most, if not all, of the expedition members contracting malaria. Mosquitoes are dicks, and I believe in Bill Gates' cause to kill all mosquitoes with a laser, which is a real thing. Do you know about that? That Bill Gates was... This might not actually be real, but I truly believe it. That Bill Gates was developing a laser that would kill mosquitoes.
I know that he has some nonprofit work that he does with, I think, malaria, but mosquitoes, even though they suck, literally, are an important part of the ecosystem. So
really?
Maybe not laser them?
My next sentence is literally, they are actually one of the few creatures in the entire world that give no benefit to other creatures in some way.
Is that so? But things don't eat them?
But they can eat other things. They don't need to eat mosquitoes. Like, no creatures would die if all mosquitoes went away, because there are flies and just trillions of other kinds of insects.
Okay. If that is true, biologists.
I think that's true.
If that is true, and mosquitoes can go, let's get them out.
Yeah.
Get that laser built. Yeah,
because I genuinely think that's why it's even being considered. Like, again, it seems crazy enough that it's not true, but Bill Gates is also a crazy guy, so... But anyway, malaria is a mosquito-borne infectious disease that causes symptoms like fever, fatigue, vomiting, and headaches. In severe cases, it can cause jaundice, which is a yellowing of the skin, usually involved in liver failure of some kind, seizures, coma, and death. So it's not fun. Mm-hmm. The canoes weren't suitable for the rapids and were often lost or destroyed, causing them to have to waste days building new ones, all while being incredibly sick. As mentioned above, they didn't pack enough granola bars and were forced to go on starvation diets to elongate their rations, which, again, sucks when you're sick because the sickness is going to be prolonged due to being malnourished and dehydrated. On top of that, there was a native, and again, I'm very sorry, a Quinta Larga tribe that shadowed the expedition and could have and probably wanted to kill them to take their tools, which were valuable due to them being made of metal. For unknown reasons, they chose to let them pass, but only after riddling Rondon's dog with arrows to frighten them, I guess? They didn't kill them, which there really isn't an explanation as to why they chose not to kill them, because further expeditions that took place in the 1920s encountered these same tribes and were attacked and killed by them. So why
the dog?
I don't know, because I think it's fine to say this, you very rude people. only 16 of the original 19 men returned, which I did get that number from Wikipedia, but when I read a National Geographic, I believe, article, it said that they had 22 men. So I don't know which math is correct. Either they had 22 and returned with 19. The death numbers were the same. But it was
Where'd
either
the men go?
I don't know.
Where'd the men go, Wikipedia?
It's either 16 and 19 or 19 and 22. I don't know which is actually real. I'm assuming National Geographic is probably more accurate. One of them died due to drowning in the rapids. It was actually the boat that Kermit was in got overturned on the rapids, and he and another named unfortunately the red shirt didn't make it, but so like there were 3 guys, 2 of them had names, the other one I think was just named Simplicio. He died and his body was never recovered, but Kermit and another like important person managed to swim to shore. And another person was shot and killed because one of the expedition members attempted to steal food and then shot the person that caught him doing it and then ran off into the jungle. And they originally attempted to catch him, but just decided to abandon him in the jungle instead when they couldn't find him. Everyone but Colonel Rondon was sick, injured, or both. Roosevelt was near death after a gash on his leg had become infected. He suffered the symptoms of infection and malaria, where he would become irritable and hallucinate. Many times he told his expedition members to just leave him in the jungle to die. And he famously said to people before the expedition, when they tried to tell him not to do this because it was stupid, that if he was to bury his bones in the South African jungle, he was prepared to do it.
South American?
Is that not where Brazil is? Or the Amazon?
South African.
I meant to say South American. I'm so sorry.
No, you're good. I just was like, wait, did I mishear this whole story?
No, it was me screwing it up. South American, because I was doing that part from memory. I didn't write it down. Yes, the South American jungle. He was prepared to do so. Of course, no one, including his own son, would leave him behind. And after surviving some, like, in the jungle emergency leg surgery, they finally ran into some rubber tappers, which I didn't know that you made rubber from trees. They stumbled into some people who were extracting rubber, or like the materials you need to make rubber, from the trees in the Amazon, because it was in high demand due to the newly created automobile, or the up and coming automobile, and being assumedly grateful for their pretty high paying jobs to, the Americans who were paying them, helped them down the rest of the river, and they were reunited with the rest of the expedition on April 26th, 1914. So they struggled for 2 months in the Amazon jungle. Medical attention was given to Roosevelt, and he made it back home 3 weeks later. For some reason, people doubted the story that he gave and the discoveries that he claimed to have found, and challenged them. And annoyed, which I would be too if I nearly died after spending 4 months in the rainforest and then having people tell me that didn't actually happen. He arranged to speak with the National Geographic Society and the Royal Geographical Society, which existed in England, even though he was still sick, had lost a third of his body mass, and could barely speak above a whisper. That's how annoyed he was that people said that he was lying. And that's where I get the basis that he was a pretty proud man. because he could have just ignored it, but instead said, no, I don't care that I'm suffering from long, term effects of malaria and other infectious diseases that I got in South America. I am gonna take a boat to England to talk to the highest society on geographical discoveries to give my statement. In 1927, a British explorer led a second expedition and confirmed all of Roosevelt's discoveries. So, shocker to no one, Roosevelt's not a liar. His health never truly recovered, and he called his complications his old Brazilian troubles. And he died in his sleep less than 5 years later of related causes due to these difficulties that he suffered while on this expedition. The then Vice President Thomas Marshall said, "Death had to take him sleeping, for if Roosevelt had been awake, there would have been a fight." Which I think perfectly encapsulates Roosevelt for who he was, to just be a really tough and proud dude.
That's awesome. I've heard that quote before, but I forgot about it. And now hearing the context of like what basically got to him, like, makes perfect sense. I also think it ties in back to the Man in the Arena passage really well, because those people who didn't go on this expedition were like, you didn't do that. And those are the critics and the people who point out when the strong man stumbles or whatever. And he's like, you fucking wanna bet?
You what, mate?
Also, it's kind of amazing to me that like he could be so sick and emaciated or whatever and like have lost so much weight and can't speak above a whisper, and these people are like, well, I don't believe it, I think you just went on some fad diet.
I don't think it was that. I think what their counterclaim was that they never actually found this river, and because the river that they sailed like basically carved a huge path, like swash down Brazil and South Africa, and they were like, there couldn't possibly be a... Did I say Africa again?
Yeah.
Sorry. South Africa. Oh my god, I almost did it again. South America. I don't know why I keep thinking South Africa. I think it was mostly that people were saying there can't possibly be a river that's big that we haven't discovered yet.
Oh.
So they were like, you didn't actually find this mythical river or whatever. You sailed down a different river. I think that was their argument. Not that like what he endured didn't happen, but that what he claimed to have discovered wasn't real.
I see. Okay. Still kind of bullshit.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
Whatever.
And it's actually, I forgot to mention this. He waited 3 weeks so that he could be strong enough to walk off of the ship back to America himself, because he didn't want to be carried or have assistance. So he recovered for 3 weeks and then walked the gangplank off of the ship in New York so that he could greet admirers on his own 2 feet. He's a strong dude.
He is a strong dude. I'm just thinking about the fact that if he needed to wait 3 weeks to walk down the gangplank, like when I'm a normal, healthy person, sometimes get nervous about like getting on and off of boats. Like, imagine if you have been sick to the point of almost death. You're probably kind of unsteady. There was a non-zero chance he could have fucking like fallen in, like, mm-hmm. But he was like, I need to walk myself. That's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he like I said, the vibes that I get was that he was a very strong and proud man, that, he could have just gone on his little, talk show tour in Argentina and Brazil and gotten on a plush little cruise line and gone down the, Rio Grande or whatever it was. And, but the government there was just like, but we got this D&D adventure all lined up for you. And he was like, hell yeah, let's go. I'm 40 years old and can handle this. Or no, he would have been 55 at the time because he died at the age of 60 and he passed away 5 years. So he was 55 while doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Dude's insane, actually.
Mm-hmm. Cracked.
Real Giga Chad.
So do you feel like you learned something today?
I mean, I never knew about any of this stuff, so for sure, I'm just a little disappointed that I spent so much time, because I was actually really excited about the March of Dimes thing, because I was like, wow, that's like crazy that, you know, the American people, and again, when I think of people like presidents that were, again, I for some reason think that Theodore Roosevelt and Franklin Delano Roosevelt are the same person, and so when I think about the most beloved presidents, I think of Theodore Roosevelt, which is true, but Franklin Delano Roosevelt might be the most favored president we've ever had because he was in office for 4 terms, and they literally had to make a rule so that he couldn't like be president anymore because he just kept winning because everybody liked him so much. And so I keep thinking that they're the same person. So I was like, oh, I'm so excited to talk about this thing. And then I was like, oh, well. And I'll be honest, it's hard for me to talk about presidential stuff because I don't like to talk about politics. And so I couldn't really touch any of his policies because, like, I didn't really want to talk about any of his political policies. So I was like, what else is there? And I did for a really long time consider doing the food and drug, the FDA stuff. Because I thought that it might be interesting to learn the history of the FDA. But I was like, and like maybe I could go into like some of the FDA's biggest controversies. Because there has to be some. But I was nah, 1, I don't want to do that because that just sounds like blah. And 2, it's not really Roosevelt's fault if the FDA doesn't follow what he intended for them when he made it. So I was like, maybe never mind. And that's when I was like, expedition. This will be fun. It wasn't fun. Because like what I wanted is I was hoping that like, and they discovered things, but I can't find what they discovered because for some reason nowhere talks about it. Like they said that they discovered a whole bunch of new insects and wildlife and stuff like that, but none of that stuff is like documented anywhere about like what exact kind of like breeds of animals they found and insects that they found. It just talks about the crazy expedition because of course that's a much more interesting story. But that's what I wanted to know. I was like, oh, I want to see what kind of animals that they found. And instead I got this crazy, which it was still interesting for sure, but it's not what I thought I would find when I first decided to research it.
I mean, you might be able to find that stuff if like National Geographic or something like that.
I Googled. That's how I found the National Geographic article about the expedition. They never mentioned what he found. It's all about the expedition itself and how crazy it was.
Oh, I just Googled while we were talking.
Yeah.
And
I know he found a deer.
I wasn't Googling about that. I was Googling TR and FDR were 5th cousins. And Eleanor Roosevelt, who was FDR's wife, was Teddy's niece. And Teddy apparently walked Eleanor down the aisle at their wedding.
That's nice.
So it's cute.
Yeah. That's nice.
It is nice.
Eleanor is a fascinating woman.
Yeah. That's certainly true. That could be a topic. I can add it to the list.
You should. Eleanor was like the pioneer and the first lady actually becoming like important because she didn't just be the wife of the president. Like she activated and did all the stuff that we kind of see happen for first ladies today, where they have their own projects and things that they strive for. If she was married to any other president, I think she might have superseded in popularity of, like, she would have overshadowed the president for how great she was, but she had an equally amazing husband, so.
Okay. Do you want to pick the topic for next time?
El Dorado.
El Dorado. I was just
El
looking at that
Dorado.
one and thinking that would be a cool topic to do.
I wrote a whole D&D quest about this.
And it was fucking
So-
awesome. I loved it.
That's going to be what I talk about next week. I'm not going to actually talk about El Dorado. I'm going to tell you about this significantly cooler D&D quest that I made surrounding El Dorado.
I mean, honestly, that fucking adventure was so good. You should talk about it.
So, what do you got going on this week?
I need to write an ASMR sometime before 2 p.m. tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
What do I have going on this week? I want to try to stream because I haven't done that in a hot minute.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I have to work tomorrow in the office and I don't wanna.
I have so many things to do next week. I am on a pretty rigid schedule. I have to edit this podcast and record 2 full-length ASMRs and a short story tomorrow.
Oh my god.
After I stream. I have to then, I'm streaming on Fansly a couple times a week in order to get the Yumi skin because it was killing my channel, my Twitch channel, because nobody wants to watch League, and you know what? I agree. And then I have to edit and put out the 2 ASMRs and short story readings by Wednesday. One of the ASMRs and the short story reading by Wednesday, and then the second ASMR by Friday. I would like to get Teen Wolf Season 2 finished so I can start working on the video for that. I have to do the shoujo potential application by the 6th of August. So I got a lot to do. And stream every day. Might have to do some just working streams if I fall behind, but hopefully I won't. Alright, well, I've been Celine Whitetail. You can follow me everywhere on the internet, literally at Celine Whitetail. On Twitch, on Twitter, on Fansly, on Patreon. Is there any other big ones? YouTube. I have my YouTube channel, which you're watching this on right now, and at the end of the video you will get links to both my channel and Gull's channel and my ASMR channel. I also have a VOD channel if you can't make it to the Twitch streams. Gonna hopefully sometime within the next month set up my recording studio for my ASMRs. Hopefully get some one of the first things I want to put out is some voice packs, some good morning, good night, you did a good job affirmation voice packs. Those will be fun, and then we can do some more interesting ones after that. But that's going to be hopefully within the next month. We had the outrageous optimism that we might get it done this weekend. I don't know why we ever thought that.
I don't know. It was an attempt. An attempt was made.
Yeah. But yeah, you can follow me everywhere.
Oh, yeah. And you can follow me at Gull the Cactus everywhere. Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, Reddit, Ko-fi, VGen. I draw. If you want me to draw things, I can draw them. I can write things too. For money. Yeah. I don't know. What else are we supposed to say? Is that it?
No, you do the outro now.
Okay.
I've been Celine
I remember if
Whitetail.
that was it.
She fucking.
Okay,
It's okay. Go ahead.
Oh, you have to say it again.
I know I do. I've been Celine Whitetail.
And I pickle the cactus. And remember, keep learning. Yeah.
Yeah. Bye. Mwah.
Bye.